There's something haunting about losing someone who leaves quietly. No fights, no final words, no dramatic ending, just distance that grows until one day it's done. And that's what unsettles him the most, because silence doesn't give closure, it gives reflection. He expected noise, anger, maybe even one last chance to fix it. But instead, you gave him nothing, and in that nothing, he finally felt everything. This is the kind of loss that lingers, not because you made him pay, but because you finally stopped trying. Sometimes the most powerful goodbye is the one no one hears. You didn't need to raise your voice, send a long message, or create a scene. You simply chose silence, not because you didn't care, but because you finally cared enough about yourself to stop explaining. There comes a point when you realize that repeating your pain doesn't make someone listen harder. It only makes you smaller. So instead of one last plea for understanding, you gave him something far more impactful, peace, and that peace, that absence of chaos, became the loudest statement you could ever make. He probably didn't even notice it at first. He thought you were just cooling off, taking a break, or playing the same game he used to play. But silence has a way of stretching, of echoing. One day he looked around and realized the energy had changed. The text stopped, the calls stopped. Your voice wasn't part of his world anymore. That's when it hit him, not in a single moment, but in a slow, painful realization that you were gone and you weren't coming back. When people lose someone quietly, they're forced to sit in the aftermath of their own behavior. There's no one to argue with, no drama to distract them, no emotional fireworks to make them feel alive again. There's just emptiness. The space where you used to exist becomes too quiet. The laughter, the little check-ins, the warmth, all of it disappears, and they're left with the sound of their own choices echoing back at them. That's what haunts him now, not what you said, but what you didn't say, not the ending he expected, but the one he never saw coming. You see, silence exposes truth. When you stop explaining, he has to start thinking. When you stop reaching out, he has to face what life feels like without your effort. And when you stop caring out loud, he realizes that the very energy he took for granted was the glue that held everything together. That's when regret creeps in, not because you punished him, but because you finally removed yourself from the position of being his emotional safety net. There's something deeply unsettling about being replaced by silence. Words can be dismissed, anger can be blamed. But silence leaves no one else to point fingers at. It just holds up a mirror, and that mirror shows him everything: his ego, his laziness, his failure to appreciate what he had. You didn't have to prove him wrong anymore. You just had to stop participating, and that's what breaks him. When a woman leaves quietly, it's not out of spite, it's out of clarity. It's the moment she realizes that begging for love isn't love at all. It's exhaustion disguised as hope, and so she stops, not because she stopped feeling, but because she finally sees that her peace is worth more than the attention she was fighting for. That's the real transformation, the moment you decide that your energy belongs to your healing, not to his understanding. He'll remember you differently now, not as the one who cried, pleaded, or fought, but as the one who simply walked away when her soul got tired. And that image will stay with him far longer than any argument ever could, because silence doesn't fade like words do. It lingers, it fills the spaces between his thoughts. It shows up when he least expects it, when a song plays, when he sees your favorite spot, when someone new doesn't make him feel the same. That's when he realizes that the quietest loss is also the hardest to forget. You didn't need closure because you became it. You didn't need to make him understand because your absence taught the lesson your presence couldn't. And in that stillness, that powerful, unshakable calm, you didn't just leave him, you found yourself. He was ready for chaos. He expected the tears, the anger, the emotional outburst, because that's what he was used to. Every time something went wrong, he relied on your emotions to reassure him that he still mattered. Even in conflict, your passion made him feel important. He thought you'd fight for him one more time, that you'd argue because you cared, that you'd beg him to change or stay. But instead, you gave him something far more disarming: calm. You walked away without the noise, without the drama, without the need to be heard. And in doing so, you took away the comfort of control he once had, because when you stopped reacting, he lost his power. That's the part most people don't understand. Indifference is more powerful than anger. Anger still shows investment. It still says, "You matter enough to hurt me." But calm says, "You no longer have access to me." It's a peace that unnerves someone who's used to emotional chaos. And that's exactly why it haunts him. He can't make sense of it. He doesn't know when he lost his grip on your heart. All he knows is that one day the energy changed, the fire was gone, the noise faded, and in its place was silence. The thing about calm is that it forces someone to feel their own discomfort. He no longer had your emotional storms to distract him from his own emptiness. Your peace created space, a space where he had to face what he did and who he became in the process. You didn't give him closure through confrontation. You gave him closure through absence. You didn't scream, "I'm done." You simply lived like you already were. And that's far more unsettling than any dramatic ending could ever be. In truth, calm is not indifference. It's evolution. It's what happens when you've finally said everything that could be said and realized it still didn't change anything. It's when you understand that real closure doesn't come from being understood. It comes from deciding you no longer need to explain. You learned that peace doesn't mean there's no emotion left. It means you've chosen not to keep reliving the same pain. That's why your calm was so powerful. It wasn't emptiness, it was strength. He didn't expect that. He expected to feel needed, to feel chased, to feel important through your reaction. He built his sense of worth on your emotional investment. But when you withdrew that, when you stopped engaging in the emotional tug-of-war, he was left with nothing to feed on. The silence you gave him wasn't passive. It was the most active form of self-respect. It said, "You no longer get to take from me what you never appreciated." And now that calmness follows him like a shadow. He'll replay your last moments together in his mind, the way you didn't argue, the way you smiled politely and just stopped trying. He'll remember how strange it felt not to see you chase, not to see you explain, not to see you emotionally unravel. That stillness will replay in his mind because it represents something he never gave you: peace. And the irony is that your peace now makes him restless. People think closure comes from a final conversation, but sometimes it comes from silence that says, "You're no longer my problem." You didn't leave him confused, you left him exposed. He's now forced to deal with the truth that your calm was never weakness. It was the strength to let go without needing to prove your worth. And that realization will sting every time he remembers it. Because he didn't just lose you, he lost the chaos that made him feel secure, the reassurance that even when things went wrong, you'd always be there to fix it. You broke that pattern, you ended the noise, and by doing so, you shifted the power. Your calmness didn't just end the relationship, it ended the version of himself that thrived on your emotional energy. And now, no matter how many storms he walks into, none of them will feel like yours, because yours wasn't destruction, it was healing. And he'll spend a long time trying to find that again, in all the wrong places. When you stopped showing up, he was forced to face himself. For the first time, he didn't have your warmth to hide behind, your encouragement to lift him, or your patience to smooth out his flaws. You were always the one who made him feel like he was becoming a better man just by being near you. You made excuses for his behavior, softened the truth, and gave him chance after chance. But when you pulled back, when you stopped texting first, when you stopped caring about what he was doing, he didn't just lose you, he lost the reflection of himself he saw through your love. And suddenly, all that was left was a mirror, showing him who he really was without you there to make it look better. Your absence became the mirror he could no longer avoid. When someone is used to being loved unconditionally, they stop noticing the conditions of their own behavior. They take comfort in the fact that no matter how distant, distracted, or inconsistent they become, you'll always be there waiting, ready to forgive, ready to try again. But the moment that pattern breaks, the moment your messages stop coming, your voice fades from his days, and your name disappears from his notifications, that's when reality begins to hit. He starts to see himself not as the man you believed he could be, but as the man he actually was when you were gone. And that realization hurts, because deep down he knows you didn't just walk away overnight. You gave warnings through your silence. You showed signs through your distance. You tried to communicate your needs, not through shouting, but through emotional exhaustion. He didn't listen. He thought your love would always fill in the gaps. So when you finally stopped trying, it was like a light went out, one he thought would never dim. And now he's standing in the dark, realizing that he's the one who blew out the flame. Your absence stripped away the comfort of your forgiveness. He can no longer justify his choices or hide behind your patience. Every quiet moment now becomes a replay of what he could have done differently. Every time his phone lights up, and it's not you, it reminds him of the void he created. That void doesn't just represent your presence. It represents the part of him that felt good when he was with you. Because love, when it's real, doesn't just make someone feel loved. It makes them feel capable, seen, inspired. You were that for him. You made him feel like he mattered, and now he's forced to confront the truth that he didn't protect the very thing that made him feel alive. That's what makes your absence so haunting. It's not just about losing you physically. It's about losing the emotional reflection you once gave him. You used to be his proof that he was still worth something. But when you stopped showing up, he had to see himself without the filter of your affection. And that's when he realized that the man you fell for, the man he liked being when you were around, had slowly disappeared long before you did. In that silence, he's forced to look in the mirror and see all the ways he failed to show up, not just for you, but for himself. He starts to understand that the love he lost wasn't just about companionship. It was about accountability. You challenged him, even in your kindness. You reflected what was good in him, even when he couldn't see it. And now that you're gone, he's left with the truth. He didn't just lose someone who loved him. He lost the version of himself that only existed because you believed in him. And that's the thing about absence. It doesn't just leave a space where someone used to be. It leaves a mirror, showing everything that was neglected when love was taken for granted. That's why your quiet disappearance echoes so loudly in his life. It's not just that you're gone. It's that, in losing you, he finally sees the truth he spent so long avoiding. You were his calm, the peace he didn't realize he needed until it was gone. In a world full of noise, of constant distractions and shallow connections, you were the quiet space he could rest in. You didn't demand his attention through chaos. You gave it through presence. You made him feel understood without needing to explain himself. You brought lightness to his heaviness, comfort to his uncertainty, and stability to his restlessness. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing that peace as a gift. He mistook your consistency for predictability, your patience for weakness, your love for permanence. He thought your calm would always be there, waiting for him to return whenever he drifted too far. He didn't realize that peace has limits too, and when it's not nurtured, it disappears. Now, that same calm he once took for granted has become the void that haunts him. You were his safe place, but he confused safety with boredom. He thought he needed excitement, something new, something different, so he chased noise, attention, validation, temporary highs that made him feel alive for a moment. But the thing about noise is it fades, and when it does, all that's left is emptiness. And in that emptiness, he realizes that nothing feels like the peace you gave him. The calm he once overlooked now becomes the silence he can't escape. He probably didn't notice it happening at first. Maybe he told himself that you were too available or too understanding. He convinced himself that love shouldn't feel so easy. So he created distance, he pulled back, he tested your patience, thinking you'd always wait. But love that is taken for granted eventually stops showing up. And when you finally left, you didn't just take your presence, you took the peace that came with it. Now every bit of noise he fills his life with feels hollow, every conversation feels shallow, every new connection lacks the stillness you brought. Because peace isn't about excitement, it's about feeling safe in someone's energy, and when he lost you, he lost that sense of grounding. The very thing he thought he could replace turns out to be the one thing that can't be duplicated. He can find new faces, new places, new distractions, but peace doesn't come from people who don't see you the way you saw him. That's the punishment of taking peace for granted. Once it's gone, you realize how rare it was. You can't buy it, you can't fake it, and you can't recreate it with someone new. He'll go out, he'll meet others, he'll laugh and pretend he's fine, but late at night, when everything is quiet, that's when it hits him. The silence that used to be comforting now feels unbearable because it doesn't carry your presence anymore. It's just empty space. The irony is that he once thought your calm made life too predictable, but now he would give anything to feel that kind of predictability again. The steady rhythm of your voice, the way your presence softened his mood, the ease of knowing you were there, it wasn't boring, it was balance. And that balance is what he's missing now. You were the peace he didn't know how to protect. It's a hard lesson to learn that peace isn't a given, it's a privilege. He had something gentle, pure, and grounding, and he treated it like it would always be there. But now that it's gone, he's realizing that the world without that kind of love feels exhausting. Because when you lose someone who brought peace into your chaos, you don't just miss them, you miss yourself when you were with them. And no matter how far he runs or how much noise he surrounds himself with, he'll never outrun that truth. The peace he lost was you, and the noise he chased has become his punishment. You didn't lose him, he lost his chance at real love. For so long, you carried the relationship on your back, trying to prove that love could heal, that effort could fix, that patience could teach. You believed that if you just gave a little more, waited a little longer, forgave one more time, he'd finally see your worth. But that's the trap of loving someone who doesn't value presence. They only realize what they had when it's gone. He thought your love was guaranteed, that no matter how much he neglected it, it would always be there waiting. He thought your loyalty was permanent, not realizing it was a choice you made every day. And when you stopped choosing him, he started to understand that he never had a right to your love. It was a privilege he took for granted. He didn't just lose a relationship, he lost a woman who truly cared, someone who saw beyond his flaws and believed in his potential. Someone who stayed when it would have been easier to leave. He mistook your compassion for dependence, your consistency for weakness. He thought you needed him, when in reality you simply loved him. There's a difference. Need comes from fear, love comes from choice. You chose him when you didn't have to, and that's what made your love so rare. But he couldn't see it. He thought the connection would survive no matter how little effort he gave. So he gave less. And now he's left wondering why the warmth he once felt is gone, not realizing that warmth was you giving your all. You see, when someone takes real love for granted, They think they're in control. They think they're the one with power because they can stay distant, detached, unbothered. But real power was always yours, because the one who can love deeply, who can be vulnerable and still choose to walk away when they're not valued, that's the person who wins in the end. You didn't lose him, you outgrew the version of yourself that tolerated less than you deserved. You didn't lose love, you made space for something that will meet you where you are, not drain you for trying too hard. The truth is, he'll never find another love like yours, not because you were perfect, but because you were genuine. You didn't play games, you didn't manipulate, you didn't love to control, you loved to build. And that kind of love is rare. It's the kind of love that doesn't just make someone feel wanted, it makes them feel seen. He'll meet people who bring excitement, mystery, even passion, but they won't bring peace. They won't bring that deep sense of belonging that your presence carried, and over time, the ones who don't. That realization won't come quickly. It'll come in quiet moments when a song plays that reminds him of you, when he's sitting next to someone new but feels nothing, when he scrolls through memories and realizes he was loved in a way that wasn't supposed to end. That's when regret settles in, because losing someone who gave you real love isn't something you recover from easily. You can replace people, but you can't replace connection. You didn't lose him because what you had to offer was never truly his to keep. It belonged to the version of you that was still willing to fight for someone who wasn't fighting for you. And once you realized that, you set yourself free. He, on the other hand, is left with the haunting understanding that he had something rare, something whole, and he let it slip away. You didn't walk away to teach him a lesson. You walked away because you finally learned yours. You can't save someone who doesn't see their own worth, and you can't build a future with someone who doesn't protect your heart. He lost his chance at real love, the kind that shows up, stays, forgives, and believes. You lost nothing, because when you let go of someone who can't meet you with the same depth you offer, what you actually gain is freedom, clarity, and a love that starts with you. There's something haunting about silence, not the kind that comes from indifference, but the kind that follows love. When you stopped reaching out, stopped explaining, stopped giving him pieces of yourself, it wasn't an act of revenge. It was acceptance. You realized that your words no longer carried weight, that your efforts no longer made an impact, and that staying quiet was the only way left to protect your peace. He didn't notice at first. He thought your silence was temporary, that you'd eventually cave, send that message, or check in like you always did. But this time was different. This time, your silence wasn't the beginning of another cycle. It was the end of one. That silence became the one thing he couldn't argue with. He could dismiss your emotions, twist your words, deflect your truth, but he couldn't control your quiet. Silence doesn't beg, doesn't defend, doesn't chase. It just exists, steady and undeniable, and in that stillness he began to hear the things he ignored before. Every unspoken disappointment, every unmet need, every time you felt unseen, it all came rushing back, not in your voice, but in the echo of your absence. That's what regret sounds like. It's not loud or dramatic. It's a slow realization that something precious is gone, and nothing can fill that space again. He'll replay moments in his mind, trying to pinpoint when exactly you stopped caring. He'll remember how easily you used to reach for him, how quickly you'd forgive, how your tone would soften even when he was distant. And then he'll remember the day it changed, when your messages grew shorter, your laughter quieter, your energy different. It didn't happen overnight. It happened the way all endings do, quietly, gradually, beneath the surface. And that's what hurts him most now, because there was no big fight, no final goodbye, just silence. And silence leaves no room for closure. What he doesn't realize is that your silence wasn't meant to punish him, it was meant to heal you. You got tired of explaining how you felt to someone who only listened when he feared losing you. You grew weary of trying to be understood in a place where you were only heard when you raised your voice. So you stopped, and in that decision, you reclaimed all the power you once gave away. Because silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's what happens when you finally learn that peace is worth more than being right. Now, that same silence that once comforted you is what keeps him up at night. He'll scroll through your old messages, look at your pictures, and realize that the quiet isn't just space, it's finality. You're not waiting, you're not watching, you're not hoping. You've moved on, and he's stuck in the replay. That's why your silence echoes, not because you left to prove a point, but because your absence reveals a truth he can't escape. You were never the problem. He was. Every time he meets someone new, he'll look for the version of peace and connection that you brought. But he won't find it, because what you gave came from depth, from effort, from authenticity. He'll hear your silence in the laughter of others that doesn't sound the same. He'll see it in the eyes of someone new who doesn't know him the way you did. He'll feel it in the moments of stillness, when he realizes that no one else will ever fill the quiet you left behind. And that's the beauty of letting go without words. You don't have to prove your worth anymore. Your silence does it for you. It shows him that your love was never something to be begged for. It was something to be cherished. And when he failed to do that, you didn't have to make him regret it, life did. Your silence became the teacher he never expected, and the echo that will follow him long after you've found your peace. In the end, he'll realize that losing you quietly was the loudest consequence of all. You didn't slam doors or burn bridges. You simply walked away with your peace intact. And that's what will stay with him, because words fade, anger fades, even love fades, but silence endures. It lingers in the spaces where your laughter used to live, in the moments he wishes he could take back. What haunts him now isn't what you said, it's everything you no longer needed to say.